To receive notifications about our daily shows, interact directly with our hosts, and more. Download our mobile app on Google Play and App Store by simply searching Morocco English Radio.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Morocco English Radio. In our today's session for Good Morning Morocco, we are pleased to welcome Ms. Najwa EL IRAKI, the CEO of AfricaDev Consulting and the Managing Director of Morocco for Lloyd's of London. Najwa, welcome to Morocco English Radio.
Good morning, Jalal, and thank you for inviting me today.
It's a pleasure to have you here. And before we can kick off our discussion, it would be nice actually to give our audience a short introduction about you, your background, and we will explain them why we're here afterwards. Yeah.
In few words, as you said, I'm an entrepreneur, a managing director, and an expert in business development and finance. And although I hold many positions, actually all of them involve deal making. So let me explain that a bit more. I initially pursued a master's in finance and business administration in France. And then in the UK, before qualifying as a chartered accountant and starting my career among the biggest organizations and investment banks, namely KPMG, Lehman Brothers, Nomura, and Mazars. I actually did them all. What is key for me is that this experience in London taught me the fundamentals of sales, analysis, and negotiation, which are key components for deal making. And it was also a turning point for me from a soft skills point of view, because my attitude changed, and so did my confidence. And it taught me that I had the right to be where I want to be whenever I deserved it, and I just needed to actually decide it and give myself the means to get there. Coming back in Morocco in 2011 as head of business development of Casablanca Finance City, Africa's first business and financial center, I found myself well equipped to source and manage the deals both in Africa and internationally. And a few years ago, I couldn't resist my desire for entrepreneurship, and so I decided to create AfricaDev Consulting. So we provide business development consultancy and financial advisory to SMEs, multinationals, family offices, and international companies who are looking to either expand or invest in Africa.
So was it an easy decision basically to move on as an entrepreneur? How did that happen?
Well, it was not an easy decision, but then after many years in the corporate world, as I explained, I did the main investment banks and consultancy companies. For me, it was, I felt that I had the technical skills and the soft skills to be able to build something on my own. And also what was important for me was that, as a woman, an African, I felt that I wanted to use our patriarchal environment as actually an opportunity. An opportunity to create an entity that represents myself and the value as 3-4. And beyond, business development and finance, as part of AfricaDev, we also strive for female, leadership, female business empowerment, and change and advocacy. And that was important for me, and that was led me to actually do it.
How do you define, based on your experience, how do you define the investment scope in Morocco?
It's a large question, but let me just try to explain what I think about Morocco since I actually came back. So I said I left when I was young and then came back. And since I came back, what I noticed is that Morocco is increasingly attractive for foreign investors. There are a number of key factors which make it attractive. I would mention 5 especially. The stable political climate that we have, a strategic location at the crossroad of Europe, Africa and the Middle East. We also signed about 50 free trade agreements with the major worldwide economies, which means that Morocco is a good location for foreign investors, either as a hub for Africa or also as a hub for logistics and transportation. Third, we have a well-educated and young, labor. Also, the infrastructure. I've since I came back, I've been surprised with all the investments in seaports, in airports, in highways, technological parks, industrial parks, and so on. And finally, and not the least, is that we have a diversified economy and different investment opportunities. So beyond the agriculture, of course, the primary sector, there is the manufacturing sector has also been picking up a lot, in particular aerospace manufacturing and automotive manufacturing, with some major players operating in the country. And there is also the technological information technology sector, which is also gives a number of opportunities for software development or data centers. So basically, all in all, it seems that there is many investment opportunities thanks to the different sectors. And I forgot to mention renewable energy. We have 300 days of solars per year, and there is also the wind energy. And from the investors that we talk to, we can see that these are the sectors where there is more interest than others. Of course, there are challenges, and when you look at Morocco, you should always compare it to other countries
100%.
where it's good to do things for Morocco, but you have to look at what other countries are for in terms of foreign exchange control and so on, legal structures, regulatory hurdles, and we hope that there is the new investment charter which is coming up soon, and which is meant to accompany the next phase of development of the kingdom. The 2 goals of this investment charter is, one, to create stable jobs, and Morocco is in need of those stable jobs. And the second thing is to reinverse the trend of private versus public investments, and to basically achieve 2/3 of private investments by 2035, as it was announced by the minister, Mr. Jalal. This is how I would define it. And but personally, I'm very I'm very positive always, and when I see all what the government is making up as efforts, I have trust in what we can achieve in the medium and the longer run.
You're absolutely right. The fact, when we live in Morocco and we stay within Morocco, we don't see that change happening. But once we leave the country and we come back after 10, 15 years, then we are quite shocked with how the country improved.
Totally.
So we can see that. What about the inflation and the global inflation? Is there any impact on the local economy, and basically on the investment scope for Morocco?
Globally, there is now an increased inflation all over the world because of the war in Ukraine, reorganization of supply chains, the increase in food prices, energy supplies. So this has, of course, impacted Morocco. Morocco, I think, had now, by 2022, an inflation of about over 8%, which is very high for Morocco. I remember when I was doing my roadshow to attract investors to come to Morocco, I was always saying we have a stable inflation, about 1-2% in the last 5 years. Today is not the case, but yeah, it's general. Of course, this high.
It's all over the world.
Yeah,
now.
So you have to look at it like that. This high inflation, can have a negative impact on investment in Morocco. It's going to make it more expensive, less profitable, less predictable. Also, investors are looking for a higher return because of higher inflation, and this will also drive the prices down in terms of valuations. The Moroccan central bank has been raising interest to make up for this. The Moroccan government is also finding solutions to food prices. The authorities have been, inspecting markets to make sure that supply and prices are
stable,
appropriate, and they've also been taking measures to curb exports of main vegetables ahead of Ramadan. No one can predict how the inflation will evolve, but what I can say is that the IMF do expect that the inflation is going to come down from an 8% globally in 2023 to about 6%, I think, this year, and then 4% next year. So, yeah.
Good. Another key point in terms of finance is the financial bill. And that's actually a critical one, because every year, and if you remember the discussion we just had before actually coming into the interview, and we said, if I'm an investor and coming to Morocco, I would like to see a quite straight and clear investment costs ahead, with no bumpy and changey road ahead. And that's what usually happens in terms of the financial bill. So a year we start with company tax, which is X, then we move to another year, then we can go up and down, and sometimes we define depending on how many millions of dirhams the company is generating, and we keep changing that. Is the financial bill, or the bills, because many of them, are they one of the factors that sometimes you get objections from investors about Morocco?
Yeah, I 100% agree what you just said. Tax stability is important for an investor. So, an investor won't come for the tax, but the tax is part of it. The first reason, it's business, but the incentives are important, and tax incentives are important. Not the main thing, but important. And so, yeah, I've been working with, for example, with the Casablanca Finance City for a while, and even as an entrepreneur, I was still working with the place to actually help investors, to get the CFC status and to benefit from that. I've been convincing international investors to come to invest because also of those incentives they had, and because of the changes every year, it has been changing every single year, in the last 3 years. So, this doesn't give a good sign to investors, because when they come for a longer, they commit to come for a longer run.
Yep.
They do business plan which are based on minimum 5 years
Yep.
business plan.
Yep.
Specifically about the new finance bill, the objective was to lower the corporate tax and to abolish all the different tax regime which are like the incentives.
Yep.
And to go towards a 20% corporate tax by 2026. What I can say is that, it's a decision which was also taken because of, Morocco was in the grey list for the OECD last year, but we
just left that grey list now.
The latest one was for the money laundering, but before we were on the grey list for the tax purposes. We are out of both of them now, and we do have a lot of pressure from international markets. But what I can see is that other countries that we should be looking at are more competitive.
Absolutely.
So so where do you put, the balance?
Yep.
You have to, please, international investors, you have to be out of the gray list, but at the same time, you can't push the button too far to not become competitive.
Absolutely.
I know that, for example, some players in the automotive industrial zones and other players in the CFC, they didn't fail to say that the competitiveness of those zones, was at risk. Because you need also to maintain the existing
to retain the existing
investors. So it's not just about attracting new investments,
but keeping what you have.
Also keeping what you have, and don't look at Morocco just as Morocco with the systems within Morocco, but compare Morocco with other countries, with Mauritius, with UAE, Ireland, and all these countries,
Eastern African countries as well.
We were working, for example, as part of AfricaDev with the Rwanda Financial Center to also help them with their financial center, and they're becoming also very competitive. So you have to look at potential competition, but also the existing markets. And the other thing which I noticed in the financial bill is that we lowered the corporate tax, but we didn't also look at the income tax, for example, which means also an inequality of the distribution and of the tax burden. And looking at today, the middle class is suffering a lot from this higher inflation we spoke about earlier. They can't even cover their basic necessities.
Absolutely.
So it's important to also, I think, to look at personal income tax and having a tax system which is simpler and more equal.
Can you tell us, Najwa, please, about the private equity, the venture capital and startups of Morocco versus what's happening today in Africa? How do you define the difference between basically what happens probably in Europe, in US, and what happens in Morocco and in Africa specifically?
Sure. Well, speaking about Africa specifically, I guess one notable trend, generally speaking, in the M&A activity is the increasing involvement of private equity firms. Private equity firms have been particularly active in Africa in the healthcare sector, education, financial services sector. To give you some numbers, private equity and VC investments in Africa has soared to about 7.7 billion USD, up 66% from last year, according to Standard & Poor's, and is actually the highest aggregate value for the continent in the last 5 years. So definitely very positive. Looking at Morocco specifically, PE activity is still very strong because PE activity in Morocco has started since many years. It's not in its infancy like VC is. In Morocco, there has been everything has been actually very about fundraising, deal making, and exits as well. There has been some really good PE exits. I will give you a couple of examples. For example, there has been the first healthcare company to be traded in the capital markets, AfricaDev, which has been subscribed, I think 3.77 times.
With AfricaDev Capital and the...
exactly. It has been led and supported by the private equity firm Mediterranean Capital Partners. Also, another company which has gone through an IPO in 2021 is TGCC. Also a process led by private equity firm Mediterranean Capital Partners. Speaking more about VC, venture capital, of course, is more more geared towards startups. So a risk capital. In terms of, if you look generally speaking at North African markets. There has been about 1.2 billion USD which has been raised. However, Morocco ranks actually among I think fourth. I think there is a first. Yes, there is Egypt which is first in North Africa with 800 million USD which has been raised. Then Algeria, Tunisia about 100 million, and last Morocco about 18 million. I mean, I give you some examples. There has been some good firms who have been raising capital, such as Sherry, which is a fintech and e-commerce platform.
For retailers.
Yes, for and exactly Belkhiyat, which has I think they've raised up to last month about 7.4 million USD, and also Ways to Cap, which is also a platform which puts in touch African businesses with worldwide suppliers. But as I said, I mean, there are still some challenges for venture capital to really pick up in Morocco. I mean, some of the challenges which have been noted is also limited access to funding. I mean, there are limited options, even though I mean, there are more and more incubators and local investors for like early stage, early stage startups. It's still, there is still a learning process and a learning curve for them to be able to actually go to international markets and go to VCs. Regulatory hurdles when it comes to fintech solutions, limited market size. I mean, Morocco is not Nigeria, which is, number one in terms of fundraising in the continent, which is a huge market. When you actually do a pilot, or Egypt, which is first in North Africa. But I mean, once again, to come back on a positive note, there are a number of factors which hopefully may positively impact fundraising for Morocco in 2023. The Moroccan government has been very supportive with the startup ecosystem in recent years through initiatives such as the Maroc Numeric Fund and also more recently with the Mohammed VI Fund. This Mohammed VI Fund, has been created during the pandemic, but it's actually operational just now, and it's focusing on having a social and economic impact locally, and then beyond infrastructure and SMEs, it's also it's also going to focus on innovative startups. And then, of course, there are a number of startup events and programs, more and more incubators, as I said, and international interest, generally speaking, with international organizations looking to invest in Morocco as an African hub for innovation, and this should help in attracting more investments. And there are a number of initiatives for the MENA region, generally speaking, like some, Forbes programs, multinationals like Huawei, Visas also have some MENA program to help with grants, both men and also some specific programs for women entrepreneurs. So definitely, I think in the medium term, PE and VC are expected to occupy more space in the African economies, and I think they're going to be real levers for the development of those economies.
Okay, perfect. How do you define the deal-making process in Morocco? Is it different from anywhere else, or?
Yeah, well, it's a very good question. I mean, as I said earlier, I mean, deal making is our specialty, right? I mean, is deal making different from Morocco to other countries? I'm not sure. I think deal making is a general approach concept, which will vary depending on the type of deal. I mean, it's a matchmaking process. As a broker and advisor. What you want is to get the best out of the transaction, and the most effective way to maintain good communication along the way is to listen and show understanding. I'm going to give you an example. I was recently approached by a company who was looking for an investor to acquire them. They were actually thinking, yet they had unrealistic expectation. They wanted to maintain their brand name. and B, they were looking for a very high price, which was offered to them a while back under different circumstances, and when they didn't want to sell. So at first, of course, we had the difficulties finding potential investors who would say yes to the two conditions, and my role was to show understanding for their feelings, fears, and demands. So what I did is, for example, explaining to them the current state of the industry, orienting their strategy, and explaining to them, that's what could be a reasonable price, and so we finally managed to come to a reasonable price, which was, more acceptable to the investor. But still, the investor was still not sure, so I had to do the same exercise again with the investor himself, and continued moving back and forward between the two of them until we reached the best scenario. So, so to put it in a nutshell, deal making, and specifically when it comes to M&A, I think it requires to dig into the psychology, of, the buyers and the sellers. Obviously, the investors, he has money that he, it took him, time to either raise or save, and the seller has a project that he often calls his baby. So, so you really need to understand, this psychological concept, and work in between the two parties until you reach the best outcome.
Well, we spoke about the deal-making process, which is, you mentioned something that can happen, and it's a process standard that we have everywhere. Is there a difference for a deal-making process if it's made by a woman or a man? Is there a difference between the two or not?
I would say yes, from once again my personal experience. I am in no way generalizing here, but what I did notice, and what I do notice, is that men and women have a different approach to deal making. On the one hand, men tend to be more Cartesian, they are direct, they want to go fast, and they want to close. And it either makes sense or it doesn't. On the other hand, women, they sometimes have a hard time distancing themselves from the psychological aspects of the deal. By here, they look more at the risks, at the potential outcomes, also at the public opinion, what other people will think.
Is the emotion part as well?
Exactly.
Yeah?
So, either way, I believe the best approach is one that combines the two, actually. One that also uses emotional guidance as a guidance tool, because at the end of the day, no two deals are the same, I can assure you that. And it all depends on the type of the deal. So some require a Cartesian approach, others require a softer communication approach. And I strongly believe that, no perspective should be the dominant one. And, at the end of the day, equality, is about joining our biggest strengths to achieve a collective performance.
When we talk about the investment in general, we see, or basically that's the feeling that we have, that there are more men than women in the finance and in investment sector in general. Did you feel any change in Morocco in terms of women empowerment, like more women into this field, or more women leading the way of investment in Morocco?
We do see more women CEOs, a lot of initiative, a lot of women associations. I am myself part of a women association called We4She, which is an emanation of the Women Working for Change, which is an international organization, and we've developed here a We4She association, and I can tell you that We4She association, we have a lot of women CEOs. We're about over 60 women. Some are in the technological sector, some are in the finance sector. They are really from everywhere. So, but personally, I think this is it's not representative of Morocco, generally speaking.
Yep.
Because myself, when I try, to recruit, and as I said earlier, as AfricaDev, we're trying to push more for women recruitment and so on, and and the change advocacy. I can see that the mentalities are still kind of unchanged. I mean, women, they still have, they don't want to actually be in front of the scene. They don't want to be visible. Is it specific to Morocco? I don't think so. I think it's kind of it's a mind
Yep.
it's a mind of states. It's just that Morocco, I think, has less opportunities
Yep.
to offer. It's a smaller market than, say, the UK market, which is the number one financial center in the world.
Yep.
Which has more opportunities to give.
Yep.
The labor market in Morocco, among the population which is active, we have a very high unemployment rate as of today, and this concerns both men and women.
Yep.
And maybe more for women, because the women, as I said, they're not also out there.
Yep.
And they have, kind of different upbringing. We're very happy to have the Minister of Finance, which is a woman,
Absolutely.
that's very promising for Morocco, generally speaking. But as a woman and a strong advocate for women empowerment, I would like to see more changes happening in the country.
Well, one last question to you, Najwa, before we close actually today's session and today's interview. If there's something that you wish, or many things that you wish for Morocco in the next coming years, it could be professional or in a personal level, what do you wish for Morocco in the next coming years? Well, probably investments as well. If we look at from investment perspective, what do you wish, or what are things that should change in Morocco that you wish that they could change in Morocco for a better future? A lot.
Yes.
Well, let's look at the top the top important.
I think
Yep.
I think a lot of things. I think, as I said earlier, Morocco has made a lot of positive changes. So what I would like to see is for all these marketing and communication action to be translated into concrete steps. What I would like to see is implementation. We're speaking about, the Mohammed VI Fund having a local and social impact, about achieving an envelope between 120 and 150 million USD by 2025, I think. We want private investment to achieve two-thirds of
Employment.
In the global envelope.
Yep.
Versus public investment.
Yep.
We want the infrastructure financing gap to be narrowed. So what I would like to see is all of that. Is really action, implementation, and for Morocco, to continue also partnering with its African partners, and together, Morocco with Africa, to actually is to have this regional integration happening. So my wish is African for Africa. The good thing about Morocco and developing countries, generally speaking, is that there are a lot of things that haven't been done yet.
Yep.
And a lot of problems that need innovative solutions.
Absolutely.
And
the market is not saturated.
Exactly.
The market is not saturated
Exactly.
yet. Yep.
And this fact alone, presents key opportunities for a lot of entrepreneurs
Absolutely.
to take advantage of.
Well, thank you very much, Najwa, for coming today and for the interview and for all the insights that you gave into our audience. I would like to remind our audience today that the interview was with Najwa EL IRAKI, who is actually the CEO of AfricaDev Consulting and the Managing Director for Morocco for Lloyd's of London. Thank you very much, Najwa, and wish you all the best with your ventures for Morocco and with the deal making and closing those deals. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back right after the music break.